Good day, class. Welcome to CPE3 Programming Logic and Design. For today, we will discuss about nested collections in Python. When we say nested collections in Python, these are collections which contain another collection. In short, it is a list that may contain another list of values. So this could be used to create a two-dimensional collection which can be accessed by indicating the row and column of that particular element. For example, in a table, in order for you to retrieve a data, you have to include the row and the column of that data, just like in Microsoft Excel. Say for example, we have two types of list here. Well, actually they have the same elements, but in L1, this is only typed in one line. So the representation of this list is just only for one line. As you notice, there is an element of this list as a list. So we have a list of fruits. The second element is a list of colors. And then the third element is a list of numbers represented as string, since it is inside the double quotation. We also have another representation of nested collection for list. For example, we have another L1 list with square bracket, and then inside this another L1 is we have the different kinds of fruits, different colors, and also we have different numbers represented as string. Also take note that this list of lists is also separated by a comma. So this element, list of elements of orange, once we are finished on defining the elements of this list, so we write a comma here for the next element. So we do this in order for us to visualize what would be the row and the column of that particular element. Say for example, if we want to access another L1's orange, we have to include the row and column where it is belong. Okay? So let's try this. We're going to use the another L1 representation since it's really easy to navigate, or it's really to trace which part of rows and columns are those elements included. Okay, so let's just define another L1 is equals to, so we have an empty list here, so we were just going to include a list inside this list. Okay, so I'm just creating empty list. So also remember class that in our list of list, the last element or the last element of list should be we should remove the comma since there are no succeeding elements for this list. Okay, so we have three empty lists here, so I'll start by the fruits. So we have apple, we also have orange, and also grapes. And then the second element is the color. So we have here red, orange, and then violet. And then the third one, we have 1, we have 2, and then we have 20. Okay, so all set. Now let's try to print. Now if I want to print violet using this nested collections, another L1, so I should type the name of this nested collection, so another L1, and then we have to indicate two indices. let's try to print first what is another L1. Let's try to print first. So Python try.py. So maybe some of you are curious, what would be the output if we try to print another L1 list? Okay. So the answer is that it would just print, okay, it would just print the collection of collection, or the list of lists inside of it. Okay. Now let's try to put a row here. Let's say 0. So this is how we access a list. We indicate the position of a certain element. So remember that this is a two-dimensional list. So this 0 here means that you're trying to access the first element. Okay? Now, in this list, we have 3 elements. So the first element is the list of fruits. The second element is the list of colors. And then the third element is the list of numbers represented as a string. So if we're going to access the index 0, once we print this, we will get the first element, which is the list of fruits. Okay? How about index 1? If we print index 1, we will get the second set of lists. So this is the second element, red, orange, and violet. How about 2? So once we print index 2, so we will have the third set, or the third element, which is a list of numbers represented as string. Okay? So if that's the case, it means that if we try to access another L1 and then specify a single index, it would return as a list. So on this part, we could imagine that another L1 index 0 is a list. So for example, if we access another L1 index 0, it would return as a list. Say for example, this one. Okay. Now, since this is the return of another L1 index 0, it means that this whole expression here is a list. And if this is a list of fruits, meaning to say we could also use another index in order to access these individual elements. Okay, so the return of this is a list, so that's why we could also add another index to specify which element of that list should be printed. Let's say for example, if I want to print orange, then I have to include 0. Now this another L1 would print the whole list. Okay, the whole list of lists. Now if we added this index 0, it would only print the first element, which is a list of fruits. Now if I added another index, which is 0, it would print the first element of the first element. Okay, so let's try. Apple. How about we change this into 1? It would give us orange. Okay, so as you can see here, as I told you a while ago, these two numbers here are represented as the list and then its corresponding row and corresponding column. Okay, so we are in row 0. Remember that the index is 0 base, so it doesn't start at 1, it starts with 0. So the counting of elements is it starts with 0, counting of elements. So the first element is, this is 0, this is 1, and then this is 2. So the first set of elements is apple, orange, and grapes. So we tried to access this row. Okay, this is the row 0 from here. Now from that row 0, we're going to access the column 1. Okay, so 0, so this is 0, column 0, column 1. So the row is the horizontal alignment of the list. And then when it comes to column, that is the vertical representation of this two-dimensional collection. Row and then column. So row, column, column, column. Okay. Now if we trace this, so row 0, this is row 1, row 2. In row 0, we have column 1. So since rows and columns starts with 0, so we have to start also with counting from 0. So apple is 0, orange is 1, grapes is 2. So if we're going to access 0 and 1, the row is 0, column is 1, it would give us the orange, because orange belongs to row 0 and then column 1. Okay, now going back to our question, how are we going to display or print violet? Okay, so let's try to trace it. So violet, the row of violet is, this is row 0, this is row 1. So meaning to say violet is at row 1. So let's try to change this. And then if we're going to count the column wherein violet belongs to, so 0, 1, and then 2. So it belongs to column 2. Okay, so let's try. So violet. Okay, it says here that dictionary in tuple also supports two-dimensional collection. Remember that in our last activity, so we also create nested collection. Okay, so this nested collection is actually composed of 3 dictionaries: C1, C2, and C3. Okay, so each dictionary should have 2 keys, name and phone number. So both of these keys are of type string. So let's try it. So you could actually pause the video if you want to try this, but for now, let me erase it. Now we have to create 3 dictionaries: C1, C2, and then C3. So let us assign an empty dictionary for C1. So let us first build the dictionary for C1. It says here that it has name and phone number as keys. So let's just create a key for this. So this is for name, and then this is for the phone number. Okay, so there you have it. And then for C1, we have to create a tuple with 2 strings as element, John and Smith. So these 2 strings, or these 2 elements, are of type string. And then the phone number of John Smith is 123-456-789, which is also of type string. So we should just put a tuple. So when dealing with tuple class, we are going to enclose the elements of a tuple inside open and close parentheses. So remember that a tuple doesn't allow us to exchange or to change the value of its element. So once it is defined, you cannot change it throughout the program. Okay, so we have here John, and then it's still separated by a comma. And then we also have Smith for the last name. As for the phone number, we have 123-456-789. Okay, so that's it. Now we just have to copy this and also the for C3. And then the second one is Alice Doe. Alice Doe. And then for the phone number, 784 dash 457 dash 789. And then for the third one, we have Bob Woods. Okay, Bob Bob Woods. Okay, and then we have 111-444-777. So 111-444-777. Okay, now it says here at step 6, after creating these dictionaries, display all names and their corresponding phone number using this format. So we have to build a string here wherein John Smith is the contact name 1, and then its phone number is 123456789, followed by the contact name 2, which is Alice Doe, and her phone number 784-457-789, and then the last one followed by Bob Woods, contact name 3, Bob Woods, and then the phone number 111-444 and then 777. Okay, so in order for us to do that, we have to print, of course. So print, and then let's build a string, contact name 1, comma. So we need to get the first dictionary. So let's say we print C1. Actually, class, once you are able to display the details of John Smith and its phone number, you could do the same thing to C2 and C3. So we just need to solve, or we just need to format C1 to display contact name 1 and phone number. So if the display is correct, we could apply also it to the C2 dictionary and C3 dictionary. Okay, but for now, let us try to access the first dictionary. Okay, now if I try to print C1, it only gives us the dictionary for C1, which is name John Smith is tuple, and phone number as a key, and then the phone number of John. Now, remember that class, in our previous lecture, we could access the value of a dictionary using its key. So the key is located at the leftmost part of our dictionary, and then followed by a colon as a separator, and then followed by, at the right side, the value associated with the key. So this is the key in order to access the value, which is a tuple of John Smith. Okay, so in order for us to access John Smith, we have to call on for the name. So let's try if this will work. Okay, so right now we have John Smith. So John Smith is of type tuple. Now how are we going to access John and Smith separately using this dictionary, or using this format. Okay, so C1 gives us a dictionary. C1 calling the name key gives us a tuple. Remember that a tuple uses indices in order to access its element. So if that's the case, we could assume that, or we could actually tell that John as the first element is located at index 0. And then Smith followed from John followed by Smith. So Smith is index 1. So in order for us to access John, we have to include the index at the end of this command. So the index for John is 0. So let's save this. Let's see what will happen. Now you have John. How about Smith? Well, of course, class, it's just like the same as this one. We just need to include comma. So C1 and then name, and then just include the index for the tuple of John Smith. So if we try to run this, oh, it treats the name as variable. So be careful also in accessing the key. So since our key is of type string name, you have to check if this is a string. So by doing so, we have to include the single quotation on how you create this key value pair. So once you run it, we have John Smith. So we could apply that also to C2 and C3. Okay? So let's try to print again. Now here we have phone number. So phone number. For the case of the phone number, we also need C1 as our collection or contact 1, and then access its key, which is the string phone number. Okay, so once you save it and run it, we will have the phone number under the John Smith. Okay, so there you have it. We already solved the first contact. Now you would do the same thing also on C2 and C3. So you just need to copy paste this and change some labeling or value to its index, or maybe the labeling only. So instead of C1, we'll just need to include C2, and then for the last one is C3. We also have here at contact number, we have C2 and then C3. So once you're done with that, you could run the program. Okay, so this is the answer actually on our last activity. So I hope that you got the correct answer. Okay. Functions. In Python, functions are defined using the keyword def. So it's like defining a function. So followed by function name and parameters if necessary. For example, we have a function that doubles the number. So let's try it. Let's create a function. So in order for us to do that, we have to type def and then the name of the function. Class, always remember that the name of the function should always describe what the function can do. So this function actually prints the number times 2. Okay, so we multiply the number passed on this function by 2. So for example, if I pass 10 on this double function, once we multiply it by 2, it would print 20. It doubles the number that you pass on this function. Okay? Actually, class, there are some textbooks or sources that uses function names like x or y or xyz. So you should avoid that. We want to make our programs as readable as possible. So we make those functions as readable or as descriptive as possible. And as a good practice class, you have to describe how the function works based from its name. Okay? So just like in this function, we have a double, or let's say double the number. You could actually name it like that, double the number, and then n. So it's like you're saying that we're going to double the number n. Okay? So once the user reads it, he or she already knows what the function can do. Okay? So we have to print inside the double the number n times 2. Actually, class, once you define a function, the implementation inside that function should be indented. Meaning to say, this instruction here, or let's say code here, depends on when the function is called by the main program. Actually, this function is actually called a subprogram. It is a program inside a program. So this program here, or function, is called by the main program. Okay? So let's create our main program. Let's say we have num is equals to int input and then enter a number. And then we will just call double the number. So double the number, and then inside this double the number is actually n. So we have to supply a parameter. So once you call that, so this is how you call the a function. So if you call that, let's say I put 5 on it, so we expect that it would print 10, but it says here double the number, type error. So double the number missing one required positional argument n. Okay, so we also need to check the parameter. So this n here is a variable that would represent the value that will be passed during its function call. So right here we have the main program. So this is the main program. Now the main program accepts a number and then calls on the double the number. In order for you to call the double the number correctly, you have to pass a number inside this open and close parentheses. And that value will be passed on in this function. So since we have a number num, we have to put num inside the open and close parentheses. Now, since we pass the value of num inside the double the number would process the program, or would process the input and then prints the output. So num will be represented by n inside this function, and n will be multiplied by 2. After multiplying it by 2, it will be printed. Okay, so let's try it. Let's say 4, so it would display 8. So another one, let's say 999 times 2, that is 1998. Okay, so another approach from our first example, we are using return. Okay, return and times 2. And then we also have here print double the number and then num. So let's try to run it. Enter a number, let's say 22, So we have 44. Well, actually, they have the same output, but what is the difference between these two? Okay, return is used to, well, obviously return the result to its caller. Okay, so the caller is the main program. Now the result would actually be returned to the main program, which is right here. Okay, in our previous example, okay, this previous example, our main program accepts an input, calls the double the number function, pass the num variable, goes to the function double the number n would represent the num, and it would print n times 2, and then end the program. So the program ended inside the function, or the inside the subprogram or our function double the number. So it ends here. While on this one, the return, what actually happened is that we ask for a number from our user, calls on double the number num, we pass num to our function double the number, num is represented by n is multiplied by 2, and the result is returned to its caller, which is the main program, and then the main program prints the result returned to it. So the program ends in the main program. So what is the purpose of using return statements? Actually, there's one big reason. The reason why we want to return a value is because we want to make another processing. Or let's say we want to make another function. We want to do some additional tasks or preprocessing for that function. Let's say after multiplying n by 2, I want to add a 10. Okay? I want to add 10. So for example, I return 2 or n times 2. So for example, 5 n times 2. So that would become 10. So this double the number num here is actually 10 plus 10. It would give us 20. Okay, so for example, I input 5. Once I hit enter, it goes here to the function 5 times 2. It will become 10. So 10 will be returned to the main program, which is here. So 10 plus 10 is 20, and it will be printed inside. Okay, so another one, for example, we want to create a function def is even. Okay, so we have another m or parameter, and then it will check if m is actually an even number or not. So if m percent 2 is equal to 0, it means that this is actually an even number. Okay, so this is even. Else print odd. Okay, now how are we going to do, or how are we going to use this? How are we going to use this? So for example, after multiplying n by 2, we add 10 to our result, and then we will check if this is even. Is underscore even. So we pass the result of double the number plus 10 inside the is even. Okay, so this is another reason. We have another preprocessing to do from its result. Okay, That's the only reason why we return. Okay, so we return the value or the result of a function because we have another preprocessing to do based from its result. Okay, after multiplying it by 2, we have to add 10 to it, and then we will have to use is-even function in order to check if that's an even number. Okay, now if the program ends here, we will not be able to add 10, and we will not be able to check if that's an even number because it ends here. Okay, so the reason why we return is because we have another preprocessing to do. So that's the reason. But if you want to end it here, you could actually just put a print here. If there are no other preprocessing or functions that you're going to use on the result. Okay? For example, if that's the final answer, you could just actually print without returning it to the main program. But as a programmer, we always return it as a practice. Okay? We return it to the caller. Okay? So let's try it. So let's run it. 5. So this is an even number. Let's say 3. So this is an even number. So 3 times 3 is 3 times 3 3 times 2 is 6 plus 10 is 16. So that's an even number. Actually, there's no way that it will become odd because we always multiply it by 2. Okay? So an odd number times an even number would become an even number plus 10, so that's an even number again. Okay? So that's it. Okay, so try this. So create functions for addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication of two numbers entered by the user. Okay, so in order for us to do that, so let me remove this. So I guess we have to accept two parameters here. Okay, you could actually add more parameters. Let's say J, K, L, okay? And then you could change the name since you're the one who is actually defining the function. So let's say operations. Now input a number. So num1 equals to int. Maybe I could just copy this one. Paste and then paste again, then paste. So num1, num2, num3, and then we'll just have to call on the operations. Operations, and then we have to pass the 4 value. Actually, there are 5, so maybe I could just remove the 5th parameter. So just pass this num1, num2, num3. So num1, num2, num3. Okay? So class, here you could actually add more parameters to be passed on this function. So it's up to you if you really need to have a lot of parameters. It's up to you since you're the one who's defining the function. And even the names, of course. But be cautious on naming those functions. It should be descriptive. Okay, so going to our function, we could just maybe end it here on our operations. Let's say I want to add num and num1, so print, or maybe all of it. So print sum, so the sum of all numbers. So we have n plus m plus j plus k, and then we also have the difference. So diff, we just have to change the operation into minus sign. We also have the product. So this would give us a big number, and then the quotient. So I'm gonna try to add this both and then divide it by Jacob plus K. Okay, so let's try it. Enter a number. Let's say the first number is 5, second number is 9, third number is 3, fourth number is 7. So the sum is 24, the difference is 14 or negative 14, product is 945, and then the quotient is 1.4. So let's try again. Let's say the first number is 3, or say 5, 6, 7, and then 8. So I think this is correct. Oh, by the way, this quotient here produces a very long decimal value. So just maybe we could just format this using the round function. So round, then enclose this inside the open and closing parenthesis, and then inside the round function we have 2 decimal places only. Okay, so let's try it. Or maybe we're lacking of closing parenthesis. So 5, 3, 4, then 6. Wait, let's try the numbers from the previous set. Where is that? It's actually gone. Okay, so maybe let's try again. 5, 5, 3, and then 3. Okay, so it's 1.67. So it is limited to that 2 decimal places. Okay? So functions. Yan. I think this is also an implementation of is even. So the reason why I showed it to you, so using the if function, return yes it is even, and then return no it's not. So we don't have to actually include the else statement here. So it's like a shortcut method. Now if the if statement, if this condition is true, it would return already the string yes it is even, ignoring the next instruction. So once we return, it will not proceed to the next line. Okay? So we call it a dead code. Sometimes it is unreachable, sometimes it is reachable. Okay? Depends on the condition. So if this becomes true, it would return to the main program, giving the no it's not string as a dead code. Okay? Now if this condition turns out to be false, it would ignore the return yes it is even and would automatically go to return no it's not. Okay? As simple as that. Now, so you have to try this at home as a practice activity. It says here, create a function that can display the highest value among 3 different integer entered by the user. So I think this is also the same as our algorithm, wherein we have to determine the highest among the 3 different integer. Okay? I think that's all for now, class. Thank you for listening, and please get ready for our activity on Monday. So it is by batch. So make sure to review on this slide, especially on using functions and accepting parameters. Thank you, class, and God bless.